Down to Earth, brought to you in association with the Musée de l'Homme.
Hello, you're watching Down to Earth with Marina Birch and Mairead Dundas.
A special season of our show this year as the UN launches its largest ever development program.
17 objectives to make the world fairer, healthier and basically a better place to live. It's been described as a to-do list for people and the planet.
Today we're starting with efforts to end hunger. Apparently it's possible between now and 2030.
But the challenge is immense. Let's take a look. There is some good news. The number of people hungry in the world has gone down by 200 million in the last quarter century.
But some factors are working against the tide. Some say that conflict is one of the most powerful. As long as there is war, there will be hunger.
But others are wondering how famine is feeding these wars. We take a look now at how hunger and conflict go hand in hand.
These upsetting images are from Mardaya, a mountain town near Damascus, where 42,000 Syrians are currently trapped. Men, women and children have all been dying from starvation after months under siege from President Bashar al-Assad's forces. When was the last time you ate?
7 days ago.
I know someone who was catching cats, killing them and giving them to their mother, pretending they were rabbits. I know people who ate out of rubbish bins, and others who eat grass.
Residents here are victims of a strategy of starve or surrender, or organized famine.
Let me be clear. The use of starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime. I would say they are being held hostage, but it is even worse. Hostages get fed. These children and women and men are struggling to survive without food or medicine.
It's an ancient tactic that's proved ruthlessly efficient in forcing enemies to surrender, but hunger is also an inevitable consequence of conflict. In the region around Lake Chad, the violence of Boko Haram has forced tens of thousands of people out of their homes.
The army told us to leave. They said air raids were about to begin, that bombs would start falling. We were frightened, so we left as fast as possible.
These people had to leave everything they owned behind, including belongings, but also crops and other necessities for survival.
When there's a war, people don't get access to their land and they can't grow food or get access to resources. They're displaced, sent to camps and left with nothing, completely impoverished by conflict.
Food insecurity and poverty are closely linked to conflict. When bringing together maps of where these problems occur, they often overlap. Hunger can also cause conflicts, acting as the triggering factor in already unstable situations. In the Central African Republic, the issue of access to land stirred up underlying ethnic and religious tensions. In Syria, several consecutive years of drought also pushed existing issues to the foreground.
The farmers weren't able to grow their usual harvest, which resulted in a lot of young men heading into the cities to find work. But there was no work and they had no resources. The uprising grew due to these people who had recently arrived in urban centres because of the drought, but it's not the only factor.
This too is a situation with echoes in history. In 1789, the French Revolution was sparked by protest over famine, eventually leading to the downfall of the monarchy.
Now, the UN says this year the world is travelling into uncharted territory. The reason you may have heard of El Nino, a natural phenomenon that has been wreaking havoc when it comes to food security. So how does it work? Well, first we can thank fishermen in Peru and Ecuador for its name after they noticed warmer waters around Christmas, thus dubbing it El Nino, or Spanish, for the Christ child. Now it happens when winds in the Pacific start to weaken and a mass of warm water moves east, creating an abnormal exchange between the ocean and the atmosphere. The consequences can be devastating, sparking floods in one region while leaving others bone dry. Because of it, tens of millions of people are expected to face severe hunger this year because of failed harvest, stunted crops and soaring food prices.
Last year we managed to receive some rains whereby our communities managed to plant something in the ground. But this year is a bad year.
Among the most affected, South Africa, which may need to import half of its staple crop maize just to survive. The worrying part is that El Nino is becoming more frequent and more violent. No one knows for sure why, but some scientists say that the influence of human-caused climate change could make an El Nino event worse. Now, if there's one woman who's been on the front line in the battle against hunger, it's Eartha Cousin in her role as Executive Director of the World Food Programme.
Her mission put the world on track to zero hunger by 2030. We asked a simple question.
Why, if there is enough food in the world to feed everyone, are nearly 800 million people going to bed hungry?
Thanks, that's a great question because I often hear we grow more food than we've ever grown before and we have more food than we need. But the reality is there's a question of availability. The food that's where we have food located many times is not where people need food, and so there's no food available in some places. The Sahel is one example where we've had challenges with food availability. Somalia, El Nino is now impacting harvest, creating food availability problems. We have food access problems where food is available, but people don't have the resources that they need to purchase the food that's available. We have consumption problems. Lack of sanitation and clean water limits the ability for people to appropriately consume and nourish their bodies. It's not as simple as saying we have enough food, so no one should go hungry. We need to address the holistic challenges of the food system across the entire global community to ensure that even vulnerable people, wherever they are in the world, have access to available food, available nutritious food all year round.
So it sounds like it's more a problem of access than quantity.
But of course, in times of war, access is even more limited. So does that mean that while conflict exists, it's impossible to put an end to famine?
I am energized every single day because we as a global community know what it takes to end hunger. And we know that even during war, when the parties will provide unimpeded access to humanitarians to provide the assistance that is necessary, we can avoid hunger. So if we have all the tools, we know what it takes, what it requires is the public will to ensure that we can continue to perform the work that is required.
Speaking of tools, the World Food Programme has just launched a new approach to dealing with climate disasters based on acting before the event occurs. It's known as Food Secure. But how exactly does it work?
Weather and climate models forecast risk of climate shocks in coming months. This forecast can trigger the release of funds so that communities can take action. Programs are implemented or scaled up in areas where drought, storm, or flood risk is high. Months before a disaster, vulnerable people and communities prepare and build resilience against potential shock.
What Food Secure provides is a weather index. It's a weather index tool that when certain criteria are met, it triggers a release of resources. And we then can use those resources to provide an anticipatory response as opposed to an after the event occurs response, which has been historically how we've dealt with crises and shocks. We wait until the point when the event has created a food security challenge before we actually respond.
Even with all these resources, it's hard to believe that we can end hunger.
We do know that the UN failed to meet its previous objective to halve global hunger by 2015. So why should we believe zero hunger is possible in the next 15 years?
Well, I appreciate your question, but in fact, I disagree. 60 countries did reduce hunger by 50%. And that's what gives us the hope that we can achieve zero hunger by 2030. We have the momentum of a committed global community. The SDGs were adopted by the global community in 14 seconds, with the leadership saying it's not about them over there, it's about all of us together making the change that is necessary to create a more peaceful and prosperous world, including achieving zero hunger. And we walk one foot in front of the other for the next 15 years towards the goal, towards achieving the goal in every country.
And finally, if you want to play a part in reaching the zero hunger goal, why not try this? An application launched by the World Food Programme. It's known as Share the Meal. Just one click, 50 cents, and you can feed a child for one full day. Already more than 4 million meals have been shared since the app was launched in November. You can even see where the children are based. The idea is that smartphone users outnumber hungry children by 20 to 1. So if everyone clicked just once, Marina, it would make a big difference. Let's start now.
And there's one meal. Thanks for joining us in this episode of Down to Earth.
Stay in contact via Facebook and Twitter, and we'll see you next time here on France 24.